Hello and welcome. I'm Asuma Katauka and you are watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. U.S. Defense Chief Pete Hegseth says strikes on Iran's nuclear sites, including 14 bunker busters and over 125 aircraft, were to neutralize threats, not for regime change amid escalating tensions as Operation Midnight amid rising tensions. Meanwhile, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer urged de-escalation in talks with Jordan and Oman, calling on Iran to return to negotiations. Ukraine's Army Chief Oleksandr Syrskyi says 10,000 Russian troops were fighting in Kursk, where Ukraine holds 90 square kilometers, to block reinforcements to Donetsk. Meanwhile, Kyiv claims $10.8 billion damage to Russia's industry, while strikes killed 2 in Donetsk and North Ukraine. And now Moscow claims new gains near Kupiansk, according to media reports. Israeli forces have recovered the bodies of 3 hostages of Rakidar Yonatan Samerano and soldier Shay Levinson, who was killed during Hamas' October 7, 2023 attack, bringing the number of hostages still held in Gaza to 50, according to Israeli military and Prime Minister Netanyahu. Russia's Dmitry Medvedev accused U.S. President Donald Trump of starting a new war by ordering strikes on Iran's nuclear sites, while LDPR leader Leonid Slutsky warned the escalation could trigger World War III, according to reports. Pope Leo urged the international community to replace war with diplomacy and avoid an irreparable abuse, warning that no armed victory justifies human suffering amid U.S. strikes on Iran's nuclear sites and escalating Middle East tensions, according to media reports. Taiwan President Lai Ching-te has declared that, of course, Taiwan is a country, in a strong rebuke to Beijing, saying China has no historical or legal claim over the island, while accusing it of escalating military pressure and rejecting dialogue, according to reports. U.S. airlines face increased risk after strikes on Iran as Safe Airspace warns of potential threats to American operators. Meanwhile, Israel reopens airspace for limited rescue flights amid missile exchanges, according to reports. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has announced that strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities have devastated its program, stressing that the operation involving 14 bunker buster bombs and over 125 aircraft was designed to eliminate threats, not to bring about regime change. Speaking from the Pentagon, Hegseth said the mission, codenamed Midnight Hammer, sent a clear warning to Tehran, adding that any retaliation would be a very poor choice. As regional tensions spike, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer has engaged in diplomatic outreach to Jordan and Oman, calling for de-escalation and urging Iran to return to the negotiating table. Meanwhile, Iran's Red Crescent says there were no deaths in the strikes, though damage has been confirmed at multiple nuclear sites. The IAEA reports 10 buildings damaged, including a fuel facility at Isfahan, but says no radiation has leaked. Iran's foreign minister has called the strikes a violation of the UN Charter, and the Revolutionary Guard has vowed severe retaliation. This follows a coordinated airstrike approved by U.S. President Donald Trump after weeks of tension. Strikes began early Friday, targeting key facilities in Bushehr, Natanz, and Fordo. Washington says the mission was a success, but regional fallout is still unfolding. Iran has now threatened the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, one of the world's busiest oil shipment choke points, As the conflict in the Middle East intensifies, Iran's closure of the strait would mean almost 20 million barrels of crude oil being forced to take the longer way out, further straining supply chains and impacting global oil prices. Major shipping giant Maersk, meanwhile, has stated that ships continue to sail down the straits and that it is monitoring the current situation in the area closely. Now we have guests joining us for this discussion. Raymond Vickery, he's a former U.S. Assistant Secretary of Commerce. He's joining us live from Washington. And we have another guest, Zamir Abbas Jafari. He's a professor at Mustafa International University, joining us live from Iran. And we have guest Spencer Critchley. He's a communication strategist, joining us live from California, U.S. Thank you everybody for joining us today. Welcome to NewsX World. Spencer, U.S. Isn't Operation Midnight Hammer proof that the U.S. is leaning more on military force than diplomatic leadership, especially when allies like the UK and EU are still urging dialogue?
Yes, and I'm very concerned about this. As we should have learned by now, an early military success, which is entirely predictable in the case of the United States, deploying overwhelming force like this, can be extremely misleading. And I'm not at all confident in the Trump administration's either inclination or ability to think through strategically what happens next. I also think that while other countries have repeatedly shown the propensity to lie and prove they can't be trusted, and certainly the United States does not have an unblemished record in this area, the U.S., generally speaking, has stood for the basic values of international diplomacy and peace-seeking and the international order. And there's a reason why countries exhaust diplomacy if they're going to resort to war, to declare war. In our case, in the United States, to have Congress involved in that decision. Because even with something as destructive and chaotic as war, there has to be some kind of effort to contain it. And if you are just going to launch a war and to break your word, even to a country with which you've been engaged in mutual hostilities for a very long time, it's damaging not just to your own reputation, but to the international order. So I certainly understand the temptation to disarm Iran. Iran, in my view, has been extremely aggressive and is openly declaring its intention to destroy the state of Israel, and if it could, the United States and the entire West. But I think that rather than succumb to the urge to try to end that threat in one military stroke, you have to recognize what an enormously complex world this is and how many factors are in play any time you make any move as significant as this.
And now let's turn on to Iran. Professor Zamir, Iran says it wants peace, but how does it justify threatening to close the Strait of Hormuz, an action that could damage not just Western economies, but its allies as well, and global energy security, including for Asia?
Okay, thank you for having me on the show, and our greetings to other guests here and the viewers as well. First of all, it was a clear act of aggression. It was a brazen attack on a sovereign nation, completely, thinking that, assuming that the colonialist power think that they're fathers of the world and they're the ones who will decide what will happen in the world. So what has happened today is one more example where the US thinks that they can do whatever they want. They do not care about any international law. At the moment, what has happened is US has broken international law and Iran has the right to retaliate. So if somebody who is creating aggression against a country, and the person is not asking why they are attacking a country rather than asking why they are responding or retaliating, is, I don't think, a fair way to start the conversation. First of all, we need condemnation, like the United Nations chief has condemned. Majority of the countries in the world have condemned the U.S. aggression on Iran. Regarding the nuclear sites that they have attacked, whether what kind of damage they have been able to see, or what they're claiming, it needs to be proven later on. But in the act itself is an act of war against a sovereign nation. And if you go on to the second point, is about the nuclear treaty. Iran is one of the countries which has signed a nuclear treaty. US has not signed a nuclear treaty. Iran has not used a nuclear bomb. US has used a nuclear bomb. Iran doesn't have a nuclear bomb. US has a nuclear bomb. So if you consider all these factors, you come to the conclusion that, okay, why is it that US, just on the assumption that you are creating a nuclear bomb, I'll bomb you. It's ridiculously arrogant way to deal with the world. Secondly, Iran, if you look at the statement by IAEA chief a few days ago, he gave a statement. Very clearly, he stated Iran doesn't have the capacity to make nuclear weapons. We do not have any proof of Iran making nuclear weapons. Even Tulsi Gabbard, who she clearly stated, and she made a U-turn later on, but she clearly stated that that Iran is in no position to make a nuclear weapon. So you create an assumption, and the same assumptions and the same lies were created in weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in Libya. War after war were created based on lies. And it's insane that the same lies are repeated, the same patterns are repeated, more wars are created, and millions of people will be displaced, thousands of people will die, and the act of aggression goes back to those colonialist powers who want to rule the world. For example, Trump, what happened with the JCPOA? The whole world came together in 2015, and Iran signed a treaty on nuclear. By 2015 till 2019, the IAEA said 20 times that Iran is cooperating perfectly with the IAEA and the NPT treaty, and the inspectors were coming and everything was fine. And suddenly this Donald Trump wakes up in the morning and he thinks, because he wants to be the best president of United States ever, so he comes and he tears apart that treaty. And then he thinks that, okay, now I need to make a new treaty. So on one hand, he says that, okay, we want to negotiate with Iran, and he starts a conversation. And on the other hand, he goes and he bombs Iran. One day after the attack, he says, we were not involved. The next day, he wakes up in the morning and he decides that, okay, it was we who did it. So you cannot trust the Americans. I mean, people have experience of more than decades that America is a colonialist, is an imperialist power. The only consistent policy that America has is to use the resources of other countries to ensure that they become the imperialist power of the world. The rest, everything changes, whether it's Obama or Trump or Biden, nothing changes. The colonialist and the imperialist mindset remains the same. The problem with Iran is Iran does not submit to these colonialist and imperialist powers. So in Iran, there is no democracy, but in Saudi Arabia, there is a lot of democracy. In Iran, there is problem. Women's rights are not there, but in Qatar and Saudi Arabia, there is a lot of things. So all these things, they've been exposed. The hypocrisy has been exposed. Iran is a country, by law, whatever has happened to Iran, it's against all international laws, and Iran has the morality right now to stand in front of the world and say whatever has happened to Iran has been illegal, and clearly Iran has the right to respond, and make no mistake whether Iran will respond or not. Iran started to respond in the morning, and the response of Iran will be severe. That needs to be known. Just last 15 seconds, I'll say that the real issue of this war is not the nuclear treaty, because everybody knows, even Ehud Barak, who is the former Prime Minister of Israel, he in his interview, he clearly stated that it is impossible by attacking few buildings and making sure some bombs are dropped on few buildings, the nuclear program can be disturbed. This is Ehud Barak, who's the former Israeli prime minister. So everybody knows this nuclear treaty is just an excuse. It's only about Palestine and the freedom of Palestine. And Israel, the main problem that Israel has is it does not agree that Palestine should be free, and it does not agree that Iran should support the Palestinian freedom. But we agree that like India became free in 1947, Palestine should become free and follow the path of Mahatma Gandhi. And the way the colonialist power were thrown out from India and other places, they will be thrown out from the Middle East as well.
Now, to all our guests, you will stay with us. We have a breaking news. USA Vice President JD Vance has now spoken out on Operation Midnight Hammer as the American strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities have been named. Speaking on the strikes, Vice President Vance has clarified that the United States of America is not, in fact, at a war with Iran. Rather, it is at war with Iran's nuclear program. Now we are going back to our discussion. Now we are joined by Raymond Vickery. He's a former U.S. Assistant Secretary of Commerce. Sir Raymond, what do you think of this statement by J.D. Vance, whereas he's saying that he's not attacking, or U.S. is not attacking Iran for Iran's regime change, but it is for the nuclear facility, which is not the case by the Netanyahu's speech earlier, where he said that they are attacking for their safety and for regime change.
Well, thanks very much for having me. I'm afraid the Vice President is making a distinction without a difference. The real question is retaliation. And if retaliation comes, which it seems probable, then the idea that you're simply going to have a one and done strike and get out is out the window. The problem now is that the logic of war has taken over from the logic of peace. And the question is how, under these circumstances, do we get back into a semblance of a rule of law, the kind of approach which has taken place since the UN formation after World War II. At this point, that path is extremely difficult. The gentleman from Iran lays all the blame on the United States. At the same time, his Ayatollah has threatened for over 40 years death to the United States and death to Israel. This is not the logic of peace. This is not the logic of the rule of law. So the question is, how does this happen? Threats to cut off the Straits of Hormuz. I don't believe that militarily that can be done at this point. The traffic through there can be hampered, which will in turn bring its own military retaliation. The problem is that we've entered a new era. Perhaps you could say it was kicked off with the Russian invasion of Ukraine, or you can go back further than that. But reality is that now both sides seek military solution, and we must get back to the UN Charter, some basic values. That's going to be very difficult under present circumstances, and what the Vice President is saying is really a pipe dream. It's better than saying, yes, we're going to bomb them into smithereens, but the logic of what comes next is not affected by statement that we're attacking nuclear facilities rather than attacking the country.
Thank you. You will stay with us. Now we have another breaking news. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says the U.S. is not seeking war with Iran and has no interest in regime change, but warns retaliation would be Iran's worst mistake yet. Speaking on Fox News, Rubio insisted the world is safer today than 24 hours ago, and the U.S. remains open to talks. He stressed Iran won't be able to play President Trump this time, adding the offer for dialogue still stands if Tehran chooses peace. Now we go back to our discussion with Spencer. Spencer, what do you make of this statement by Rubio? And then keeping in mind that just a few hours ago when Foreign Minister Arakci spoke in Turkey, in Istanbul, he said that Iran never left the desk of negotiation. And what is your stance on this?
Yes, I agree with Mr. Vickery, and I actually agree with several of the criticisms made by Mr. Abbas. I think while I certainly do not defend the behavior of Iran over the years, and I don't think colonialism excuses the establishment of a cruel, repressive, and torture and terrorism sponsoring theocratic dictatorship with its own imperialistic ambitions, by the way, as it's made clear repeatedly. I think many of his criticisms of U.S. behavior are valid, especially now under the Trump administration. And it seems to me that aside from the moral questions involved in simply lying to people, pragmatically, as a matter of international relations, as Mr. Vickery has just outlined, I think, very well, even if you are practicing what's often referred to as realpolitik, this supposedly realistic view of international relations where each country sets moral questions aside and just pursues its own self-interest, if you repeatedly prove that your word is worth nothing, then you are just preparing the way for international disorder, which harms your own country even from the purely self-interested perspective. If you think about it in physics, we learn in high school physics about entropy, the tendency of the universe to tend towards disorder and death, the loss of energy and order, and the depressing prospect of ending up in nothing but disorder and death. Well, the unilateral use of force and the abandonment of international standards, even recognizing that all countries violate standards from time to time and no country has a perfect record of behavior or close to it, the abandonment of those standards and the resort simply to force because you believe you're more powerful than anybody else is the path of maximum entropy, maximum death and disorder. Sometimes military action is unavoidable, but I think resorting to it under these circumstances is extremely dangerous. If it somehow were to work out well, I think that would be equivalent to magically winning the lottery, and would not be an endorsement of this kind of so-called strategy. I don't think it should be dignified with the word strategy. So again, I understand Israel in particular's fear at what Iran has been trying to do for years, encircling it with terrorist proxies, for example, and sponsoring terrorist attacks. And I understand the American position on this as well. As Mr. Vickery points out, I mean, if you're going to repeatedly call for death to two nations, along with the entire Western order, I think you need to take responsibility for your words. But still, just as Iran's objections, many of them legitimate to colonialist history, don't justify the behavior of its current government, neither do I think that the current situation justifies the behavior we're seeing on the part of the Trump administration.
Thank you. Now we have another breaking news. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi says he held a phone call with British Foreign Secretary David Lammy to discuss the U.S. strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities. Araghchi said they exchanged views on the attack's implications for regional security and international law, while details of the conversation have not been released. Iran continues to push for diplomatic condemnation of the strikes and is seeking international support through the UN Security Council. Now we go back to our discussion. Professor Zamir, what do you think of, is there still a chance for diplomacy here with US saying something else and Europe saying something else, including what Keir Starmer said and also what Macron said earlier today?
Look, the party, which is the United States and the Western governments, they are not to be trusted, right? And history has shown that time and again. The attack took place on Wednesday, on Friday morning, 3 o'clock, and on Wednesday they had a meeting, and they were supposed to meet back again on Sunday, with the promise of the meetings are going very well, and we need to discuss and we need to bring about a diplomatic solution. And what they did on Friday morning was they attacked the country with whom they said everything is going fine and we are discussing with them. So it's nice to say, like words like, oh, we need to sit back, and we throw the concept of justice out of the window and we just talk about peace. I don't think that's actually how it should work. The problem in the Middle East or the West Asia is the American presence. They have so many air bases. Why should America be present in the Middle East? The question is very simple. Why does America use all the Middle East resources? That is the problem. Why is it that one country is allowed to break all international laws, and then you say, oh, Iran is also doing it, and Iran? Okay, let's talk facts. Okay. You discussed about Iran breaking international law. Which international law did Iran break? Point number one. Point number two, about talking about proxies. Okay, let's start one by one. Okay, because there's not enough time, but I can speak about every country that you're talking about as proxy. For example, what was created first? Did Israel first invade in Lebanon, or Hezbollah was created first? It was Israel invaded in Lebanon, and after that a political freedom movement called Hezbollah was created. Similarly, it was occupation first and then the resistance started. And then you create a blanket statement and say, oh, they're supporting the proxies, and all the freedom movements, whatever the freedom movements might exist, you equate them to what? Terrorism. That's not right. You need to clearly differentiate. ISIS is a terrorist organization. ISIS has deep relations with Israel. There are video evidence of Netanyahu meeting injured soldiers from ISIS. The video is available on YouTube, where he's speaking to the soldiers of ISIS. The former defense minister of Israel, speaking to Mehdi Hassan, clearly stated that we support ISIS. We support. So when it is safer for you, you come and support terrorism. When it is safer for you, you come and support Taliban and create terrorism in the Middle East. You fund terrorism in the Middle East. And then when it blows out of your hand, then you say, oh, terrorism is very bad. And Iran is the creator of terrorism. Absolute nonsense. So, I mean, why? If you look at the entire scenario, there are two poles right now in the world. One is the imperialist pole, and all the Middle East countries are subservient to the Middle East, to the American interest. They're there to bow down to the American interest. And then there are few who say, no, we are not going to bow down to the American interest. That is the problem. The problem is Iran has lots of natural resources, and they want Iran to submit to them. And all these nuclear treaty and nuclear bomb, all these things are absolute nonsense. Let me answer one more point, which both of my friends or my senior guests have mentioned about death to Israel. Okay, in India also, they say Murdabad. Murdabad means is you do not agree with somebody. Well, let me explain you word by word what Ayatollah Khamenei himself said. What do you mean by death to America or death to Israel? He clearly stated we do not have any enmity with the people of America. This is the statement, the videos and the tweets are available. When we say death to America, it means death or end to such hegemonic powers who want to control the world and who are creating a lot of problems in the world. Iraq war is because of US, Taliban war is, Afghan war is because of US, Syria war is because of US, Libya war is because of US. If you look at US and the problems that it has created throughout the world, anybody would say such a hegemonic power should end. So it's not, it doesn't mean that they want the destruction of everybody. It's absolutely very naive way to think that way. And secondly, talking about Israel and the hatred of Jews and all these kind of things which are promoted by the Western propagandists, let me make it very clear.
Professor,
Just 30 seconds, I'll complete. 30 seconds.
Please stay
Iran
on the
is the
topic.
Iran is the second largest Jewish population in the West Asia or the Middle East. Okay, so Iran, there is ministers of parliament who are Jews. There were powerful positions given to Jews inside Iran. So it's not true that Iran is against Jews. No, Iran is against Israel because Israel is an occupier and Iran believes Palestine should be free. That is the real problem.
Thank you very much to all our guests, Sir Raymond Vickery and Sir Spencer Clitchery and Professor Zamir Abbas Jafri for joining us and sharing your expertise in this ongoing situation. Now we move on to our next news. According to Commander-in-Chief Oleksandr Syrskyi, Ukraine's strategic long-range strikes have resulted in over $1.3 billion in direct damage to Russia's industrial and energy sectors this year. The total economic impact, including indirect losses from disrupted logistics, shutdown of facilities, and supply chain interruptions, is estimated to exceed $10 billion. These strikes form a core part of Ukraine's deep strike strategy aimed at undermining Russia's war-fighting capabilities. Concurrently, Ukraine's air defense efforts continue to make progress. The military reports that approximately 82% of Shahed-type drones launched by Russia are being successfully intercepted. However, Ukrainian officials emphasize the need for additional surface-to-air missile systems to strengthen defenses against ongoing drone and missile threats, targeting critical infrastructure and civilian areas. Well, that's all we have time for. We will continue to bring more news updates from around